Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Today's video is related to the second part of medieval age, and this is basically the lesson number 2 of Anglo-Norman age, where we are going to discuss exclusively about the literature produced in Anglo-Norman period or Middle English period. Literature that was produced in the Middle English period included chronicles and histories, then romances and the religious writings. स्टूडेंट्स सबसे पहले हम क्रॉनिकल्स को डिस्कस करते हैं. जो लैटिन राइटर्स हैं उनका सबसे इम्पॉर्टेंट कंट्रीब्यूशन ये था कि दे प्रोड्यूस्ड अ सीरीज ऑफ क्रॉनिकल्स विच गेव अ फेथफुल रिकॉर्ड ऑफ द कंटेम्प्रेरी इवेंट्स. उस दौर में होने वाले वाक़यात को बहुत ही फेथफुली रिकॉर्ड किया इन क्रॉनिकलर्स ने, जो कि सोबर माइंडेड हिस्टोरियंस थे और जिनकी इंटेंशन ये थी टू प्रेजेंट द ट्रूथ एज दे न्यू इट. अगर हम जेफरी ऑफ मॉनमouth की बात करें तो ही फॉर्म्स अ नोटेबल एक्सेप्शन बिकॉज हिज बुक हिस्टोरिया रीगम ब्रिटानिका और द हिस्ट्री ऑफ द किंग्स ऑफ ब्रिटेन was not based on history, as Jeffrey added his own imagination to that, and that was just based on the folklores, but as a source material that is beneficial, as it provides some knowledge about the lifestyle of the people of that age and different important events. From Bede onwards, the monasteries had maintained a tradition of chronicle writing. मोनेस्ट्रीज़ के अंदर क्रॉनिकल राइटिंग की जाती थी, ओल्ड बुक्स को कॉपी किया जाता था. अगर उस दौर के एमिनेंट हिस्टोरियंस की बात की जाए तो दे इंक्लूडेड विलियम ऑफ मैल्मसबरी, वॉल्टर मैप एंड मैथ्यू पैरिस. Students, there were some other chroniclers also. Roger of Hoveden, he wrote a history of several centuries compiled from various sources. Then Florence of Worcester was notable for having produced the first attempt at universal history. Then Eadmer, who was a monk of Canterbury, wrote in 6 books the history of his own times down to 1112. Then Jocelyn of Brackland, a monk of St. Edmundsbury, wrote a chronicle describing the picture of monastic and social life of the 12th century. Henry of Bracton, who died in 1268, he wrote a treatise on the laws of England. And then there was Learmon's Brute, written, it was also history but written in rhymed doggerel verse. Now, students, during the Middle English period or Anglo-Norman period, metrical romances or metrical tales were also written, and they were very famous. If we look at the definition of metrical tale, that is a narrative poem, means a poem that narrates some incident which is written in verse that relates to real or imaginary events. इसमें कुछ हकीकी या तस्वुराती वाक़यात को बयान किया जाता है इन सिंपल स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड लैंग्वेज फ्रॉम अ वाइड रेंज ऑफ सब्जेक्ट्स, कैरेक्टर्स, लाइफ एक्सपीरियंसेस एंड इमोशनल सिचुएशंस. इससे भी ज़्यादा अप्रोप्रिएट जो डेफिनेशन हो सकती है मेट्रिकल रोमांस की वो ये कि दे वर द स्टोरीज ऑफ एडवेंचर रिटन इन वर्स, and a metrical romance is also known as chivalric romance, and it's a type of narrative poem or verse story which typically deals with courtly love, knights, chivalric deeds, adventure, enchantments, etc. Means knights who were sent on different expeditions, and they had to go on different adventures. They had to roam about here and there and go to distant lands in order to perform some function, some task assigned to them, and metrical romances were basically based on the narration of all these interesting incidents. 3 types of romances were common and famous in that era. They were Matter of Rome, related to the stories of Charlemagne, and then Matter of France, related to the Matter of Rome was related to the stories of Alexander the Great. Matter of France was related to the stories of Charlemagne, and Matter of Britain was related to the stories regarding King Arthur and his 12 knights. So all these stories and romances, they were famous in that age. When it comes to the religious writing of Anglo-Norman period or Middle English period, there were 3 types. popular theological writings, then popular didactic writings, and non popular devotional works. As far as popular theological writings were concerned, they included homilies, alms, omilum, for example, and legends and lives of the saints. As far as popular didactic writings were concerned, they included discursive histories and manuals. The most famous ones were Cursor Mundi and Verse Debate, The Owl and the Nightingale. Then, non-popular devotional works included the selective the works produced for selective readers, and these works were more spiritual in character. And the example was Richard Roll's The Pricks of Conscience. Homilies which were produced included Poema Moral, a moral ode. It was written before 1200. This was basically a sermon in verse that is interesting not only in itself but also for the influence it exercised on the development of English meter. थी तो ये रिलीजियस पोएम, लेकिन इसका स्टाइल और फॉर्म इंटरेस्टिंग थी, और जिस तरह का मीटर इसमें यूज़ किया गया उसने इंग्लिश मीटर की डेवलपमेंट में अपना बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट रोल प्ले किया. यहाँ पर लैटिन मीटर इएबिक सेप्टेनेरियस को अडॉप्ट किया गया. सेप्टेनेरियस एक ऐसा मीटर है दैट कंसिस्टेड ऑफ दैट वाज वर्स लाइन ऑफ 7 feet. And the poet introduced a new principle of accentuation that has ever since left its mark on the development of English meter. So this poem was important in that aspect. Lines of the poem consist of two long lines to a strophe with end rhymes. Strophe means a large group of lines which form a section of a long poem. So, this was an important homily produced in that age. Students, the next of the theological writings was Om's Omilum. This was the poem written in the early part of 13th century by Om, who was an Augustinian monk. इंटेंशन उसकी ये थी कि वो गॉस्पेल्स को इंग्लिश वर्ड्स में ट्रांसलेट करे, और लेकिन जब उसने ये ट्रांसलेशन की तो इसमें ना तो उसने फ्रेंच राइम को इंक्लूड किया, ना एंग्लो सैक्सन एलिट्रेशन का इस्तेमाल किया, बट देयर वाज syllabic regularity in that poem, and this syllabic regularity led to an intolerable monotony. So, as far as its form was concerned, this poem was not that much interesting. Then, among the theological writings, legends and lives of the saints were also there. There were legendary poems, sacred biographies expressing a real tribute to an inspiring personality. And this inspiring personality was a saint or a sacred figure. The legends of the saints represent Christian mythology as it had been formed in the course of centuries. The earliest of these legends, the lives of Saint Juliana, Saint Margaret, and Saint Catherine, are written in rhythmical alliterative prose. They manifest a return to Old English tradition to which have been added richer coloring and more varied diction. So, these legends were also written in a very interesting manner. Students, other theological writings included popular legends and lives of the saints, and here you can notice a list of these popular legends, including childhood of Jesus, the descent of Christ into hell, the purgatory of Saint Patrick, and the poems describing the lives of the following saints such as Saint Margaret, Saint Dunstan, Saint Michael, etc. Students, Cursor Mundi was a popular didactic poem. It was an enormous poem of some 30,000 lines, dealing with all the important incidents of both Old and New Testament story and a great variety of moral and religious topics. It dates from the last quarter of the 13th century and it is encyclopedic in scope. Means ये poem बहुत ज़्यादा information provide करती है. Skillfully rhymed, it is good introduction to the medieval view of the world history and of much else, and it serves to remind us once again of the डायडेक्टिक पर्पस ऑफ सो मच मेडिवल राइटिंग। इस पोइम को पढ़कर हमें पता चलता है कि मेडिवल राइटिंग का एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट कैरेक्टरिस्टिक था मेडिवल लिटरेचर का, दैट इट्स पर्पस वाज बेसिकली डायडेक्टिक। Students, a sense of transience of earthly life pressed hard on the Middle Ages. जितने भी राइटर्स हैं हम उनकी राइटिंग्स में देखते हैं कि दिस सेंस ऑफ ट्रांजिएंस ऑफ अर्थली लाइफ इज़ वन ऑफ द important themes, and these writers develop their own kind of cadence for its expression. Anglo-Saxon alliterative verse was an effective medium for the older heroic poetry, but the new kind of sensibility of the Middle English period demanded a lighter and more flexible mode of expression, and that we notice in the literature produced in this age. The use of octosyllabic couplet is one of the styles adopted from French, and another important didactic poem, The Owl and the Nightingale, is one of the earliest verse debates using this style. The Owl and the Nightingale की बात करें तो this poem was written probably around 1200, and it has not much religious import, but it's an interesting study in ethics. Its form is epic and has been written in short octosyllabic couplets. बेसिकली ये वर्ड्स डिबेट है और इसके अंदर दो बर्ड्स यानी आउल और नाइटिंगेल दे एलेगोरिकली स्टैंड फॉर टू वेज ऑफ लाइफ. नंबर वन द मोनास्टिक एंड नंबर टू द सेक्युलर. मीन्स एक बर्ड मोनास्टिक लाइफ को रिप्रेजेंट करता है या जो चर्च की लाइफ है उसको रिप्रेजेंट करता है, जबकि दूसरा बर्ड सेक्युलर लाइफ को रिप्रेजेंट करता है. या हम ये भी कह सकते हैं कि ये जो दोनों बर्ड्स हैं दे एलेगोरिकली स्टैंड फॉर टू काइंड्स ऑफ पोइट्री. दो डिफरेंट काइंड्स ऑफ पोइट्री के लिए भी ये सिंबल्स हो सकते हैं. एक बर्ड डायडेक्टिक पोइट्री को रिप्रेजेंट करता है जबकि दूसरा बर्ड एमोरस या लव पोइट्री को रिप्रेजेंट करता है. So it was very interesting poem. The more purely literary interest is found in the simpler and more natural diction. यानी एक और इम्पॉर्टेंट फीचर इस पोएम का ये कि जो डिक्शन या लैंग्वेज यूज़ की गई है दैट वाज वेरी सिंपल एंड नेचुरल एंड स्मूथ एंड मेलोडियस वर्सिफिकेशन वाज देयर, while there is historical interest in the picture it gives of रूरल लाइफ. अगर हम इसके अंदर डिपिक्ट हुई हुई रूरल लाइफ को देखें तो हमें उस दौर के रूरल लाइफ की एक रियलिस्टिक पिक्चर हमारे सामने आती है. सो इट मीन्स दिस पोएम वाज आल्सो इम्पॉर्टेंट फॉर इट्स हिस्टोरिकल एलिमेंट. स्टूडेंट्स, नॉन पॉपुलर डिवोशनल वर्क्स में रिचर्ड रोल की लिखी हुई पोएम द प्रिक्स ऑफ कॉन्शियंस बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. रिचर्ड रोल एक फोर्सफुल मिस्टिकल राइटर था मेडिवल इंग्लैंड का, और ये न सिर्फ खुद रिलीजियस नॉलेज रखता था बल्कि ही वॉज ऑल्सो कंसर्न विद पर्सनल होलीनेस. सो हिज चीफ वर्क अपॉन विच हिज पोजिशन इन इंग्लिश लिटरेचर डिपेंड्स इज द प्रिक्स ऑफ conscience. This work is full of quotations from the fathers and ecclesiastical writers. अगर लैंग्वेज की बात की जाए इस पोएम की तो वो बहुत क्लियर और विविड है, लेकिन जहाँ तक स्टाइल की बात है तो स्टाइल के रेफरेंस से अगर हम इसको देखें तो ये पोइट हमें केयरलेस नज़र आता है, क्योंकि इसने मतलब ही डिड नॉट ट्रबल हिमसेल्फ विद द नंबर ऑफ सिलेबल्स इन अ लाइन. ही वॉज जस्ट कंसर्न्ड अबाउट द सब्जेक्ट मैटर और द मैसेज कन्वेड थ्रू हिज पोएम. इम्पॉर्टेंट थीम्स जो हैं इस पोएम की वो उनमें शामिल हैं wretchedness of human nature, the transitoriness of the world of life, then the themes included death, purgatory, the last judgment, hell and heaven. Students, Nuns Rule was an important prose work produced in that age. This was a treatise containing guidance for women. The author of this work is Bishop POA, and he divides his book into 8 parts, including religious service, 5 senses, fleshly and spiritual temptations, confession, penitence, rules regarding food, clothing, possessions, and treatment of maids. He insists on the primary importance of the religion of heart. means the thing that he was basically concerned with was the purity of heart and the love for Christ. These were the major themes which were dwelt upon in this work. Students, I hope you have understood today's lesson. Wish you all the best. Allah Hafiz.